Hello there and welcome, patrons, and eventually I'll be putting this on YouTube as well, although it's going to start off on Patreon first as a nice little intro to the year. This is a special video that I'm doing that is going to be talking about this year coming up at a glance, specifically the energies that Santa Muerte will be working with, and what we need to do to be in alignment with that. So 2022 is a special year. We just came out of a really crazy couple of years, and that was kind of an initiation. Think of that as an initiation. Essentially. There was definitely a lead up to that initiation. You could kind of feel pressure building, and then we went through an initiation. And there is no turning back once you go through an initiation. There's so much to be said about 2022. And if you're in the Patreon group, I may put this off until maybe the astrological new year for those who are not a part of my Patreon. But those who are going to be getting this right away, which is great, in the month of January. So this is kind of, there's a lot that I've been talking about on Patreon. There's a lot that I've been going into. I do a check-in every month, messages from Santa Muerte. A lot of times it's always channeled messages. A lot of times it's, so far it's always been with the cards. Not that it will always be. But this is no different. This is channeled messages. I've already had many come through this past month when I did the channeled message for Patreon, and I had to try to cut it short. Short meaning it was very long, and it was like a half an hour long channeled message, which some of that was for the month and some of that was for the year. So you guys already have an introduction to this year, and the energies that are going to be at play. We're mostly through the initiation. If you have been initiated at this point, you will know. And if not, I'll give you tips to get through it so that you can release the intensity and start moving forward in ways that are more conscious and focused specifically, and where to focus your efforts so that you get the most out of this next year and the year after, because this year and the year after are definitely connected. This year we're stepping out of that initiation of the past 2 years and stepping into something else. And it's going to be very good. Also in certain parts of the world, specifically the United States, there's going to be potentially a lot, I think that there's going to be a lot. This is coming from astrology right now. There's going to be a lot happening. There's going to be intensity being raised. There's going to be more of the same, but it's just going to get to this heightened fever pitch. It just isn't going to stop. It's going to keep going. And for a lot of things we're seeing the past few years, and truly long before that, if we've been paying attention to things that aren't working. Systemic issues that are not working. We've already been made aware of many of these on a collective level in the past couple of years. Unless you were hiding under a rock, you've seen a lot of them. There's going to be more. And then there's personal. Not just the collective, but personal. And so there's going to be two separate ways of navigating starting this year. We're going to be, and I'll just get into it, I suppose. Essentially for 2022, the collective is going to reach a fevered pitch. People who are holding on to the old paradigm, all of that's going to reach a fever pitch. All of that's going to become very, very loud, very, very intense. It's going to be difficult for some people to navigate that. So that's something to take into consideration this year. You don't have to buy into the old paradigm. The old paradigm is toxic. The old paradigm is dying. The old paradigm needs to die. Until it dies, though, until it truly dies, it's in its final battle, I suppose. But until it truly dies, and some parts of it may not, depending on, nothing ever is perfect. We don't, if we're talking about, say, the French Revolution, things changed. France is doing much better than it was back then now. But on the other hand, it still carries some toxicity with it. We as a human collective, have never been perfect at releasing things. As individuals, we've also never been perfect at releasing things. We only release that which we can see, and the only way to see it is when it grows in intensity. So it's so intense that you can't help but notice it. And that is a sucky place to be, but that's where we're going to be. And that's where we have to be in order for things to change. So just prepare yourself for that. If you already are aware, if you already are through, and I mean, I'm not telling you to drop your awareness ever. I think it's always good to allow yourself to be more educated about something, allow yourself to be open to see other people's plight that maybe you haven't experienced or you haven't seen. So I'm not telling you not to do that. I'm not telling you to hide under a rock. But I am telling you, if you already know of something that needs to be fixed, do what you can to fix it. But you're one person, and this is a collective thing, and this is going to take a few years of building. You can't just start from nothing. We have to start from something. So collectively, what I'm going to be telling you to do, generally speaking, aside from making sure that you understand what's actually going down, the things that actually allow yourself to still have eyes, but and still do what you can to help. But otherwise, disconnect yourself from this toxicity that's going to keep building. Disconnect yourself from the fever pitch that it's going to become, or you will absolutely burn yourself out 100%. If you are identifying, connecting, and identifying with the current paradigm, you will have suffering in your life. I guarantee it. By the end of the year, it's going to just be really painful. It's going to be incredibly stressful. We've seen that recently, the past couple years, where everyone kind of freaks out collectively. You'll see it on social media. You'll see it online. And I'm not even talking about points here. A lot of the points made during this are very valid. And a lot of the points made during this are very not, very sticking your head in the sand. And so that's, I'm not referring to any of that. I'm just referring to the energetic bodies. Our bodies were not meant to take on so much energetic stress. And the vibrations are changing. We are bringing in more it's a higher frequency, and a higher energetic frequency is becoming available collectively. And that's going to lead to something new. It's going to lead to a new paradigm. We are not there yet. But if you allow yourself to continue to identify with the old paradigm, you will notice that you're suffering. You cannot continue to do that in a way that's going to be healing, in a way that's not going to be triggering or incredibly stressful. So especially if you have any sort of mental health issues, and a lot of people who work with Santa Muerte honestly do, because we've been through it. We have been on the negative end of these things. She works with people, or her people, let's say, the people who she has a heart for. And that includes her devotees, but is not limited to her devotees, are the people who are the downtrodden, who are the broken, and I don't mean that literally, no one's ever broken. But the people who've been through the ringer, been through it, that's her people. That's the people she has a heart for. And most of her devotees, let's just be honest, are people who've been through that in their own lives, myself included. So I'm telling you all this because I'm assuming you're all devotees, and if you're not, that's fine. This can still apply to you in the constructs of Santa Muerte and the messages that she would have for you and her devotees and the people of Earth at large this year. So just understand that this fever pitch is going to be building. If you have mental health issues, especially anything with like PTSD or, anxiety, extreme anxiety, or even depression, anything where you get triggered easily with certain things, allow yourself to disengage from the collective, aside from having some eyes and knowing your path, I guess. You never know. Something might come up where people start making a point about something and you're like, wow, well, I never really considered it from that perspective. That's very true. But you don't have to connect to the heightened energy around it. You don't have to make any comments. I recommend disengaging a little bit or creating a safe space for yourself on these social media platforms specifically. So you can engage in only places that you know are safe and only with people you know are safe. Create safe groups so that when you're posting, you're only posting to those safe people. I highly recommend this. And even if no one is commenting or liking your posts, at least you're not causing yourself pain, trauma, and harm. So keep that in mind. Disconnect from the collective. There will be a new collective paradigm. It's not there yet, but it will be. And I was talking about this a little bit in the January 2022 reading messages from Santa Muerte, blessing from Santa Muerte that I do every month for my Patreon followers. That was getting very clear about this. And that's when I started getting into the 2022 cycle. And I'm like, oh no, this needs to be a separate video. So here we are. Moving forward, in 2022, what needs to happen, and I'll talk about what needs to happen right now to get to that point. I'm sort of doing this in reverse order. But what you need to be doing is focusing on your paradigm, your new goals. This is going to be a time for rebirth for a lot of people. If you're not there yet, you'll still have the opportunity. You just might be belated a little bit. There's a lot of people going through a lot of stuff. And like I was saying in the Patreon video this past that I just recorded recently, January. January is really a good time for releasing. Right now, we're definitely in the underworld. A lot of people never resurface. So I'm going to talk for a minute from the Northern Hemisphere perspective. Southern Hemisphere, I say this a lot in my videos on Patreon. You guys get a different version of things if you want it. You can also, I know some people who are in the Southern Hemisphere that do actually follow Northern Hemisphere because you still celebrate Christmas. It's just in summertime. Or you still celebrate Halloween, for example, but it's in your spring instead of your fall. And some people like to do it reversed. Where they're actually celebrating with the seasons that, some of these holidays were designed around. So it really just depends on you and your outlook, and you've probably, especially if you've been doing this your whole life in the Southern Hemisphere, you probably have your own little system, and I'm not entirely sure how it works because I've visited the Southern Hemisphere for, months on at a time, but my husband's from there. But I personally, my knowledge, my equilibrium, my internal equilibrium is based in the Northern Hemisphere. So for some of you, take it or leave it when I'm talking about these seasonal changes. They might be opposite for you or they might be the same. So whichever it is fine. But a lot of people did not return from the underworld last year. Usually we go down into the underworld around Halloween, which is when our winter is. And over winter, we are in the underworld and we're doing lots of underworld work, releasing, reconnecting back to the roots, getting rid of roots that are toxic in our lives, so that we can plant roots that are nurturing, supportive, that are grounding. It's an exercise in transformation and grounding, personal grounding. And so moving from that, usually around the beginning of February, we move into out of the cocoon or womb of transformation, which I see as the womb of Santa Muerte. And there's a magical transformational process that just happens. And by that I mean when, let's say a woman gets pregnant, she doesn't know she's pregnant for a while. There's a magical transformation that happens where suddenly, boom, there's new possibilities. A seed has sprouted and taken life. That's kind of the process that I'm talking about here. So somewhere in there's a magical shift that happens. We're not even a part of it. There's a tipping point. So as you're releasing things to Santa Muerte, placing them at Santa Muerte's feet, all of your burdens, all of your traumas, all of your triggers, everything, you're placing them at Santa Muerte's feet. We talk about this a lot on the Patreon and how to do that. and she's able to transmute those. I often do that through fire, but you can do that through any element, or even just nothing. You can just place them beneath her feet and watch them go into the ground. I guess that's an element. Usually working with the elementals is an easier way of transmuting things, but it depends on you and your practice. So yeah, we place them at Santa Muerte's feet, and she turns them into compost for our life. She burns away the negative, associations that we have on this energy, anything. Even, as someone who has PTSD, even flashbacks, you can literally, it's energy. It's energy that triggers us, but it's just energy. And it is a lot of energy. And when you're triggered, there's a lot of energy. And so being able to simply release that, let it transmute into whatever, and just push it into the gold. Be like, you know what? I'm getting triggered right now. Oh my God, am I triggered? But you know what? I'm going to release it because it's not me. It's a reaction based off of something that someone else did, not me. So I'm able to now release that to the feet of Santa Muerte and let her channel it into the work that I'm doing, into my future, into my goals, into my desires. Because whenever you're handed a card, whenever you're dealt a hand of cards, that's now yours. You didn't get to choose what was dealt to you, but you do get to choose what you do with those cards. That energy that's being, essentially transmitted to you from someone else, mirrored, traumatized, thrown on you in a traumatizing way, whatever it is, or even just annoying, someone sends you nasty vibes, whatever, you can just take them and throw them into the feet of thank you for the energy, and throw it into the feet of Santa Muerte, even if maybe it's hard to be grateful for it in the moment. Throw it at the feet of Santa Muerte. It's just energy, and it can help your dreams. It can help you to make things happen in your life. You get to decide what you do with that energy. Even if it's energy that feels nasty to you, she can transmute that. Energy is simply energy. Nothing in the universe is ever... the universe is impartial to good and bad. Only we think of good and bad because of our ego selves, because we're in body. So we're conditioned to believe that we're separate from everything else when we're not, including any of the energy in the universe. And the only difference between good and bad energy is our observation of it. It's similar to in physics, you observe certain particles doing certain things, and they're going to do maybe other things. It's similar to that. It's our own observations that change or color the energy. The energy itself isn't really ever anything else. It's just energy. So take that energy, throw it to the feet of Santa Muerte. You release it. You let it go. You do cord cuttings this time of year. Cord cuttings are very good. And that's basically just saying, I no longer am identifying with this thing. This isn't me. I am eternal. I am this huge being. I am all of these things, but this particular thing is not me. The energy's with me, yeah, but it is not what I identify myself as. And you can just throw all that to the feet of Santa Muerte. And that can be a very healing, transformational experience. A lot of people in the past couple years, I'm gonna go into a little bit of many things. There's a lot to talk about, I guess. And if you're not on my Patreon, you haven't been hearing all of these messages. So let's just dive into it. Past couple years, a lot of people have descended into the underworld, in that time of the year, and then they never actually came back out because they were resisting this change. It was so much going on, so many, let's say, bad vibes, so much energy, anxiety, negativity. It was so overwhelming for so many people. They couldn't disconnect from all of it because we're taught to connect to everything. In fact, if you've been in any sort of dysfunctional family systems from the moment you were born, and most family systems are dysfunctional, at least to some degree, then you are made to take on the accountability of others. And by that, I mean, when someone says you're wrong, then you're wrong. When someone says it's your fault, then, it's your fault. When someone says, no, this isn't me, it's you reacted. We've been collectively gaslit our whole lives, essentially. And so it's very easy for people to identify with certain things when they really don't have to identify their own identity with it. They don't need to identify with it. They can say, this isn't me. This is not who I want to be. This is not who I am. This is not who I will become. It is a choice to some degree. And to some degree, I know I'm simplifying it, but I'm trying to do so it's clear for you. It is a process of transformation. This is a type of transformation that most people haven't even been through before, even people who are familiar with transformation, which is why a lot of devotees have been having a hard time accessing Santa Muerte energy, using just her normal cloak colors, using just her normal, the normal ways that we connect to her. A lot of devotees have been connecting a little bit better right now through her incarnata form, which is where she's half human and half skeleton. And that's literally showing the transformation you need to go through. It is a clue. And so basically, a lot of these people just feel lost and alone. And what I will tell you right now is, if that's you, just know that Santa Muerte is still there. She still has you. She literally has wrapped her cloak around you. When we go into the underworld, when we go, descend, start our descent into that season of life. Sometimes there's literal seasons of life where we go through several years of it. Collectively, that's happening now. So people who are too attuned to the collective will not have resurfaced last year. And now they're back in the underworld again. But they never actually left. And so it's very, very dark and scary because they don't know what's going on and they think it's them, and it's not them. It's the collective. It's not you. It's the collective. And the fact that, maybe you can't hear Santa Muerte's voice or see her face as much and don't really feel the energy as strongly, it's simply she wraps her cloak around you, her protective cloak. You're in her loving embrace. No, you look up, you don't see her face. You see nothing. It's black. It's dark. You don't hear anything. Her cloak is thick. She protects you. When you're through that part of the cocoon, in the cocoon, let's just say the caterpillar weaves a cocoon, and then it literally becomes goo, a primordial ooze inside of the cocoon. That's literally you inside the embrace of Santa Muerte, her wrapping her cloak around you. A lot of people are just still in that cocoon. That's all it is. It's not supposed to be a negative thing. It's actually supposed to be a protective thing, but because you don't know what's going on, because you can't see, you can't hear, you're in the dark, you haven't reemerged, it's taking forever, everyone around you's freaking out, you can feel the vibrations. I mean, even in the cocoon, your ooze, you're made of water. Water is very conductive. It feels all of the emotions. Maybe it doesn't understand why, but it feels them and it knows what they are on a primal level. It just makes all this much more fearful for someone, but you're protected. You are protected. Focus on her incarnata form. That helps you to release. If you cannot release while you're in the cocoon, then you won't be able to move on to the next part of transformation, which is the rebirth, or you will rebirth in a way that is like a bone that hasn't been set properly. And it won't be fun. It'll be painful because you didn't undergo the true process of transformation. And it is scary because who knows what's going to happen. You're making, in the process of transformation, we take all of these dead, decaying matter, things that aren't ours, things we don't want to take, and by not taking responsibility for, I mean, we take responsibility for our own issues, our own power, our own everything, where we've been wounded. It's saying, to the people who have harmed you in the past, let's say your parents, your family, your, exes, whatever, you say things in your mind, right? You don't have to say it to them. I advise not. But in your own mind, it's saying, I take responsibility. I will not take responsibility for you. I will not take responsibility for your issues. I will not accept responsibility for the things that you do to me, to others, to whatever, the things that you're mirroring, the ways that you're gaslighting me. But I do accept that this stuff happened to me and I can't change it. I can change who I associate with now. I can change what I do with that hand that's been dealt to me, but it's taking responsibility for that hand as your own hand, because it is. However you were dealt that hand, it doesn't matter. Whoever dealt that hand to you, it also doesn't matter who the dealer was. What matters is that's your hand. You have to accept responsibility for that hand or you will not win the game of poker. You cannot be like, people are going to be like, well, you don't have a good hand. In the game of poker, it's the exact same way. Think of it that way in a little bit. It's kind of strange maybe, but it can also be liberating to do so. You don't have to take responsibility for anyone else's hand. You would never. But you do take responsibility for your own, and you play it the best way you can. And that is exactly what we're talking about here. So it's being able to say, these things happen to me. I take responsibility from this point on of myself, of the cards that I was dealt, and how I move forward. I take responsibility on how I deal with this person if they're still in your life. That would be making a safe space for yourself. So maybe that person isn't safe. Maybe they got to go. Maybe that person is safe and they just accidentally harmed you. Maybe, all sorts of things. Maybe it's something you don't want to bring up and you just want to have very firm boundaries with this person because you know that talking to them is never going to fix anything. And so instead it's about protecting yourself and giving yourself that safe space, enforcing your own boundaries and making sure that you don't get stressed out or triggered about this stuff. So this is kind of what we're talking about. That's what should happen in the underworld. And somewhere in there, you're in the womb of Santa Muerte, let's say. The cocoon, it's the same thing as the womb of Santa Muerte. It's the womb of transformation. It's the womb of breaking everything down into the base particles, which is what happens during death. Same thing. All the energy, all of it, not just the physical energy. All energy is broken back down into its original particles. It is reunited with all of the other primordial ooze, essentially. And then it is able to be rebirthed. And that's what Santa Muerte does. And then after that point, somewhere around that point is when you're going to be able to see her face again, because she passes you off at that point to, let's say, quote, her sister, the other side of the coin, her cousin. I've seen them described many ways. If we're going back to Mesoamerican sort of mythologies, it would be Mictlan Siwal or Mictecasual, Santa Muerte, when she was, a Aztec Mexca goddess, and Tonantzin, which was the flip side to death. That was life. She was life. She is now Our Lady of Guadalupe. So I don't recommend working with the ancient deities unless you are of that lineage and you know how to do it, because you will definitely do it wrong. And I personally wouldn't want to piss off any deities that incorporated human sacrifice, among other things, into their worship. So I recommend working with Santa Muerte and Our Lady of Guadalupe, knowing that they are the modern incarnations of those past deities. Santa Muerte transfers, essentially it's one womb. There's just a tipping point where you have sacrificed so much that you have made enough room in your life for new blessings to come in, for new visions to come in, for new dreams to come in, for new goals to come in, and for those goals to get fertilized properly, for those goals to be able to take the compost, the wreckage that was composted, and be able to use that to transform, to transmute. That process, it's hard to even describe when it happens. You just suddenly feel lighter, and you are now in the womb of the mother. And that's oversimplifying it as well. It can, extend one way or the other a little bit. And even when you get to the womb of the mother, you can still do all this more minor versions of that to help contribute. And you should. You should always be doing the transformational work. It's just sometimes it gets really dark, really deep, really heavy. And that's where a lot of people are at right now, because you're resisting. A lot of people are resisting or still refusing to let go of the old identification of themselves, the old way that they identify with things, with past traumas, with things in their lives. That doesn't have to be your identity. And if you can release that identity, you can release the suffering that goes along with it. If you just take your time, get into a space that's very comfortable, dark, warm, blankets and pillows, maybe completely dark, maybe a little bit of candles, whatever, dark, comfy, cozy, but dark, and being able to feel like you're in a womb, and then just let go of everything, including everything about who you are. everything. You don't exist. You exist, but you don't exist. You exist, but there's no data about you. Nothing, not even in your own mind. You just are. That's it. You can just sit there for a while. Nothing matters. Literally nothing. You can leave it all at the door. Leave it all behind, or feed it again to Santa Muerte so it's no longer there. She kills it. She reaps it. It's gone. And then she allows it to decay. And that becomes the primordial ooze, essentially, that you step out of. You have to surrender to that process. If you cannot surrender to that process, you will not transform, and that will be a huge problem for you this year. So, and if not this year, definitely next year. 2023, we cannot be in this cocoon anymore individually. It will be maddening. So make sure you do the work. We reemerge usually. I'm getting ahead of myself. We reemerge around Beltane, Walpurgisnacht, May 1st, that sort of ish time. I usually feel myself reemerging or getting ready to maybe around the beginning of Aries season, at the very beginning of the astrological new year at the equinox, the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere. Again, if you're southern hemisphere, this might be opposite, or you might do it slightly differently, and that's totally fine. But you still have this process, and it's still the same thing, and you still likely were in the underworld for an extra year, or a lot of people around you were. Anyway, so usually around February is when we quote should, and I'm using that loosely because there's no shoulds here. This is healing. But that's the natural progression. Around February 1st to 14th or so, we move into the womb of the mother. By that time, usually. Again, it's fuzzy. Don't beat yourself up if you're not there. It's okay. Some people can be a little bit more of the preemies, and some people might take longer, and that's okay. It's not a problem. But that's usually around the time. And then we sit there beneath the ground like that seed that's just being nurtured beneath the ground and sprouting and pushing itself up. And then, around, again, the equinox, we start to push through. Definitely by Beltane or so, we're out of the underworld. And again, sometimes that just doesn't happen for people, and that's okay. There's cycles of that. Sometimes it's a cycle in your life. Right now it's collectively, and also individually. That could happen if we're pushing off, if we're not allowing ourselves to surrender. You have to trust Santa Muerte. If you can't trust her, she can't help you. If you can't trust her to do the things that she says she will, but you need to surrender to her. If you can't do the surrendering, it will never happen. You'll just be this it's the picture of her on her tarot card deck, the Santa Muerte, I have it right in front of me, it's what I'm using today, the Santa Muerte Book of the Dead Tarot. It on the box is the image of her, the death card number 13 in the actual deck. And it's a picture of her scythe beneath her with a baby crib, and she's praying, looking very happy as an expectant mother, but she with an hourglass and everything, but she's never going to birth that child. That's not what she does. That's what she wants. So her hope for you, her blessing, her gift to you is that she can't necessarily give you life, but she can give you the tools that you need. And that's what she needs you to trust her, that she will be able to break down the dead and decaying matter in your life so she can turn it into the tools that you need and pass you off to her, quote, sister, Our Lady of Guadalupe, however you view that relationship. I've heard Mexican devotees literally call them sisters. I've heard them call them, cousins. I've heard them call them two sides of the same coin. It's life and death. It's the two forces of the universe. And you have to be able to enlist both. Humans are terrified of death, so we don't ever surrender to her. That is one of the sacred mysteries of Santa Muerte, and one that you need to learn for 2022. So we're just going to dive right in now. Did I miss anything? Oh, maybe. Just to... Wow, it's been half an hour already. I knew this would be long. There's so much coming through right now. Anyway, the incarnata form. let's touch base on that for a second. Half alive still, half dead, not finished going through the decaying process yet. That's how a lot of devotees have been connecting recently to Santa Muerte if they feel blocked. So try that yourself, see how that feels. And, as you move through that, once you get to the point, the tipping point, you'll start to connect to her in her normal ways again. And it'll be like old times. Like I went through this, I guess last year. Last year about this time until maybe May, I went through a similar thing where it was really hard. I also moved across the world and all of my altars were packed up, and that does also make a difference too. So don't feel bad if this is you. It's common right now, very common right now. It's one of the major complaints I'm hearing from people everywhere. So connect to this form. It's also going to give you the secret of that transformation. And that's what you need. It looks like, if you know the rune dagas, where it's like an hourglass. It literally is an hourglass turned on its side. Which is also very indicative of Santa Muerte. It is literally a transformation description. It's where we take the energy, we push it through this funnel, so it keeps getting denser and denser and denser until boom, right at that center point where it's tiny, it's the most dense it could ever be. And that's the point of transformation, where it flips the polarities and comes out the other way, a different thing. It's a naturally occurring force of nature. You can see it in all sorts of reactions, chemical reactions, everything. And that is a mystery of Santa Muerte. That's a secret of Santa Muerte. And when you can apply that alchemically in your life, you get the type of transformation that everyone wants right now. Everyone wants it. Collectively, we want it. And the thing is, the more individuals that do this, focus on yourself, sacred self-focus right now, sacred self-care, I suppose. Being able to really take that energy and focus on just you, focus on your transformation, and allow that transformation then to become a collective. If all these people this year, and a lot are already doing it, if all these people this year are able to just focus individually and focus on peace, transformation, releasing, shedding the old snake skin, literally just step out of yourself for a second, crawl out of your own skin. You don't need this. So take that into consideration as you move forward. If the collective, if enough individuals do this, it becomes a collective. And if enough individuals do this at the same time, it becomes the new collective paradigm. And that's what I'm seeing for this year. That's what Santa Muerte has been telling me. That's what a lot of the astrology things have been pointing to as well. Right now, we're in the middle of a Venus and we just started Mercury retrograde. So we're Venus and Mercury retrograde right now. And that's showing us the things that are not working. We're going to be going through a Mars retrograde this year. That's going to show us more of what's not working. A lot of that's going to be our approaches and how we move forward with things, how we take something and respond in action. Hopefully that's conscious action and not unconscious action. That's going to be the key this year. And that's what I'm trying to show you right now, because if you're already ahead of the curve, that's just going to show you places that you're still holding on to the old paradigm, and it's going to allow you to release that. You have to release the old paradigm. It is dying. It is toxic. It's awful. Notice what isn't working. If you haven't noticed certain areas already, just know that basically nothing's working. And we need to create something new, something more loving, something more sustainable, something more inclusive. All of these things. Think of the people that Santa Muerte has a heart for, the downtrodden, the people south of the border specifically. She has a heart for. Those are literally her people. If we're talking about her as a goddess and how she became Santa Muerte, those are her people by blood. So that's very important. But not just that. Death is a construct that we all go through. Death has been around forever, but in her current form as Santa Muerte, those are the things that she does hold dear, and there's a reason why she's coming forward as Santa Muerte and not just as death itself. There's a reason why you're following Santa Muerte and not some other death god or goddess or whatever. And Santa Muerte incorporates all of them as who she is. She is primal. She is not, quote, a deity. She's beyond that. She's all of it. But I'm saying this because that sometimes gives people a hang up. Yes, she is death for all people. We all have our skeleton. That is our most sacred shrine to her. But her heart really is for the people south of the U.S. border, the people in Mexico and also South America, and anyone who's downtrodden. That would be the LGBTQ community. That would be anyone who's been a black sheep, anyone who's been a scapegoat, anyone who's had to suffer for no reason or because they were doing the right thing, all of these things. Even people who are suffering just because of, BS, bureaucratic BS, people who are poor. Like the list goes on and on and on. But those are the people that the new paradigm is going to be for. Or should be for. Again, nothing is necessarily perfect when it's birthed. There is an element of chaos in everything. Just as there's life and death are the two fundamental forces, you also have, and I'm saying this as a human, so, as a cosmic force, I don't think that this is quite as big of a deal. I think that it's more supposed to be that way, just for highlights that you can't see anything if there's only darkness. You can't see anything if there's only light. There has to be both. And so I say that more in this construct. I'm not trying to use a good or bad, but as a human, it's really hard not to at least have some sort of peppering of that. I'll call it chaos. Chaos and conscious stuff. And that's always going to be present. And so because of that, nothing can ever be, quote, perfect. Even when we birth this new paradigm, it will have elements in it that are carryovers from the old. It will have elements in it that are maybe a little toxic. Nothing is birthed from nothing. Everything is birthed, again, from the remains of that which we sacrifice. But then there's things we don't sacrifice. And so that's why the sacrifice part is so important. That's why the releasing, the cutting, the letting go. You have to let go of everything, because if you don't, you're going to be creating something that's more like the past paradigm than it is new. Because you haven't let go of those things. You can only transform that which you let go of. Period. So anything that's not working, you have to let it go. You have to transform it. So that's what we're looking at doing. And the more people that can do that, the more that it'll be a new paradigm, and the more that we're going to be able to allow people to embrace that, and the more people will keep releasing the old paradigm to jump onto the new paradigm. And maybe within the next 10 years, hopefully, we can have a brand new paradigm. I might be too, I don't know, hopeful with that maybe. So historically, it has taken generations, and that might be what it takes. I would love it if it only took 10 years. Even if it was intense, I'd love it if it only took 10 years. But it will be a higher frequency, a higher vibration. So pay attention to anything coming out of shadow, coming out of fear. Shadow work right now is what the prescription is. You must do the shadow work to do the releasing. No, and that is, if I can say one thing that Santa Muerte will require of you, it is the shadow work. Everything stems from the shadow work. If you can actually do the observation necessary with the shadow work, you're going to be able to do all the transformation that she will require of you. You'll be able to come to her using her systems, because you're not going to be egotistical enough to think that you should take your Norse paganism and apply it to Santa Muerte. Don't do that, by the way. I am literally a priestess of some of these things, as well as Santa Muerte, and I never mix them because that's rude to do to her. That I come to her with her own systems, but that's because I've done that shadow work. I come to her trying to seek her understanding of death, not coming from my understanding of death and transformation. That also is a shedding of that egotistical skin that a lot of devotees do have to go through. Shedding any sorts of bias that you might have for her people. That's why I harp on it so much. Everyone has to do that if you're going to work with her. And not just her people, but everyone. People who maybe aren't her people. You still need to shed those biases. And that has to happen all the time. And it happens in layers. And that's okay. You're not going to get everything the first time. That's why we go through it every year. That's why we go through it more than just once a year. We go through it on minuscule levels throughout the year, even when we're in the season of light. So just keep that in mind. That's what we're all going through right now. And it might be a very long process. It might not be. It might be a very intense process. It already kind of is. But it doesn't have to continue to be that way. You are being given the keys right now. And so we're going to step into these readings. I hope I didn't forget anything. There was a lot that I covered in the Patreon as well. So if you're a patron, you probably have heard some of this stuff before, and you've probably heard me go deeper into it as well. So at the center of everything, we have releasing our concepts of what we deserve, in a sense, both negative and positive. But it's also talking about releasing. This is such a deep card. It's the Two of Cups reversed. And that means so many things. But what I'm seeing a lot of on a meta level are people who cannot release this concept of deserving of happiness. And by that, I mean, it's a pendulum swing. If you want ecstatic happiness, you must be prepared to also have to go through the ecstatic lows to get there. It might be a little more, a little less turbulent if you were to concentrate instead of, I must be ecstatically happy, like all of the things that Hollywood says that we must have, or, this is the type of love specifically that means that we are loved, or that means that this, that, or the other thing. There's a type of prescription that we think that we should have that shows us that this is a good life, or that shows us that this is love, or that shows us that this is happiness. I can tell you that love is not pain, that love does not bring or seek pain, but sometimes love does have pain elements to it. Sometimes you go through pain. When a loved one dies, you are in pain because that's the flip side of love. The flip side of love is pain that shows that there was love. However, love is never something that causes harm, that wants to cause harm, or that continuously causes harm. Sometimes someone who loves you does cause harm because we're human. And then they learn from that and they don't do it again. Or they learn how to navigate, some sort of down period in their life where they're not causing you harm from that. But instead they're saying, hey, look, I'm just this and I still care about you, or whatever. There are ways to navigate that. And there's all sorts of gray areas in between. But what I'm trying to get at is expecting this heightened sort of just exuberant type of ecstatic love, all as a place where you arrive, and a place that just continues at that heightened vibration. That's probably not likely. Do the shadow work here, I suppose. Look for peace instead. Look for being satiated instead of overeating. I'm using that in relation to emotions. This is a very emotional card. There's going to be a lot of people this year that have extreme negative emotions where they feel hurt, betrayed, these types of things. Connections that might betray each other, even friendships that might feel like we're betraying each other because we're on this hardline approach to, black and white thinking. Again, that's the old paradigm dying. And we need to step into a new paradigm. It might be a good idea to take a step back and only focus on the relationships that are nurturing you and that you can nurture in return. Nurture, that's a great word. That's not talking about ecstatic happiness. That's talking about finding a place of safety, a place of community, a place of acceptance within each other, in a way that's also not harmful. I mean, of course, I'm not recommending that someone seek this sense of security and safety in a person who doesn't believe that you should have the same rights as other people. Of course not. I'm saying distance yourself from those people. You don't have to make it a big drama thing. You can just keep your distance and keep your sanity and not have to deal with their issues because they're on the old paradigm path. And instead you can, find those people in your life who are supportive of you, who are not judgmental. And if you don't have them, find them now. There's so many people that can be that. And it's okay. And it's also okay. It's also okay to be by yourself a lot. It's also okay to be in a more conscious cocoon this year, womb, let's say, on a collective level. On a collective level, you might feel a little bit cut off from other people. And that's okay. Focus on yourself. Focus on your goals. Focus on that which brings you more joy, which brings you more peace, which brings you more nurturance, stability. Joy is a good word. It doesn't mean ecstatically happy. It means, that's a warning. That's a warning sign. There's nothing wrong with being ecstatically happy if you just are. But if you're seeking that, if you're constantly seeking that, you will be disappointed almost all the time. And that's what I'm trying to get at. Beware of that. Beware of places. Beware of setting yourself up for any betrayals. The second part of that card. Just allow yourself to find places of nurturance. Think of things as a womb. Think of things as planting a seed, as putting positive roots down. Something that's been very healing for people this past year has been maybe weeding out by the root things that are toxic, and instead planting things that are not, or even literally uprooting yourself from toxicity, if that's where all your family roots or your current roots where you're at are, physically speaking, even moving across, the country, across the state, across the town, whatever. These types of things are okay this year, actually, as long as you're doing them for the right reasons, as long as you're doing them because that's toxic. I'm no more a part of that. I'm not identifying with that anymore. And now I'm going to plant a new garden, a new tree, a new plant, a new whatever. And I'm going to have this be a place of nurturance, be a place of safety, be a place of respect, of love, of joy, of peace, of patience, of kindness. Those are actually... that's the fruit of the Spirit from the Bible. You're welcome. I remember that from being a kid. I'm not kidding, though. That's what they're all based in love. All of that is based in love. And a lot of people right now, things have grown so toxic that the roots of the system that should be based in love are not. They're not. They're the inverse. Remember when I was talking about the rune dagas and flipping things? It's literally flipped on its head, and it has to be transformed back into love. Has to be. The world will not allow it to continue. If we cannot do this, I would not be surprised if like people are freaking out about extinction things. That would probably happen if we, probably not in our generation, but probably within the next couple, if we cannot figure out how to properly sacrifice what love has become, which is toxic. It's not love anymore. And sacrifice that and create something, transform, allow it to transform. The beauty about this is it's an alchemical process. You don't have to do the transformation at all. You just have to do the surrender. You just have to do the release. You have to do the letting go. You don't actively do anything in the transformation process. Not really. It happens for you. You do the releasing, the letting go, the cutting off of things and the sacrificing of it. And then on the other side of that, you take what's given back to you. It's like a new hand, but a better hand. It's like saying, well, I'm going to take all these cards, give them back to the discard and draw all new cards. This time I'm drawing them, not that dealer. That's what you're saying. And that's the process of transformation. And when you draw those cards, you basically get to make new plans. make new goals, dream again. You have to allow yourself space to dream. That happens in the womb. You don't have to do anything during that time. You just have to allow it. You have to allow. You have to surrender. That is the hardest thing for humans, and that's why we fear death. So yeah, anyway, I think I'm good on that card. I think we can move on. So moving on, the card that's defining this is the Ace of Swords. This is, again, picking up a new idea, a new concept, a new mentality, new challenges, new purposes, but it's more of a challenge. It really is, because a lot of us haven't let go. So this is still a year of challenges. This is definitely a year to do writing. Because of the Ace of Swords, any sort of writing, any sort of talk therapy would be good as well. This is a card of communication. It's a card of writing out your goals. Do that. You can take some time to do that. You would also be totally fine waiting until like March even, which is likely around the time I'll be having this on the regular YouTube channel to do this. You're given plenty of opportunities throughout the year. So even if you miss the first chunk of this year with doing some of this, you have all year long to do these things I'm telling you to do. To do these things that are being channeled. But it's a sword, and the wonderful thing about this particular deck and the imagery, and I might go back just a minute to the Two of Cups because I was doing this without looking at the card. I should have been looking at the card. But I'll just talk about the imagery of this card for a minute. The imagery in this card is basically a sword being surrounded by overgrowth of vines. And it gets to decide what of that is toxic and gets cut, and what of that gets to keep growing. So it's a card of discernment. It's a really good card. It's a scary card because it's a card of leveling up, but I did just tell you that we're all leveling up, whether we're leveling up kicking and screaming, or whether we are choosing to do so. We're leveling up. This is an upright card, so it's a card of choice. Going back to the Two of Cups for just a second. It's knowing who's going to fill your cup. I flipped it upright for a second to see it, but you have these two skulls basically pouring water into each other. Their hearts are separate, but connected. And that's what we're talking about, finding those people who will pour their leftover, and I don't mean it that way, their love back into you. And so when I say that, I mean there's a wellspring of love that exists in all of us because we are literally the divine. We are literally everything. It's in all of everything. We are everything. And we're also just ourselves right now. Our illusion is that we are only ourselves, that we are this ego self. That's the ego is the illusion. And knowing that is half the battle. But knowing that you are literally also everyone else at the same time, even though you can't feel that, knowing that you are connected to Santa Muerte right now, even if you can't feel that, that's what I'm talking about. You don't have to pour your love into people who are going to harm you. Of course not. But there's also parts of you that cause harm or chaos or even harm yourself. So again, showing compassion for those parts is okay. Just don't put yourself in a position to get hurt by it, is what I'm trying to say. Compassion is always good. You can always practice compassion at a distance. That's totally fine. But as you're allowing this wellspring of self-love, of, self-compassion, compassion for others as well, to well up inside of you, it gives you the opportunity to overflow onto everyone around you that you choose. Again, you can overflow at a distance. It doesn't have to be direct. But the direct part is going to be people who also are able to overflow onto you, who don't give you everything, who don't literally take the well outside of them, pull it outside of themselves and try to hand it to you and say, okay, now give me yours because I have nothing. It's being able to fill yourself up first. And I need to state that very clearly. And this is a year of necessarily doing that. You have to do that. Sorry to go back to this card. I just didn't look at the specific. I usually use a different deck with clients, so I just go based off of what I could just do this without cards. But the imagery is very important for this. So being able to overflow, that's what we're talking about. Overflow on your goals, overflow on your dreams. That is the water that is able to allow things to grow, and allowing yourself to be around people who aren't going to try to steal the source of your water, which means you can't overflow anymore, but to allow yourself to be around those people who are going to also overflow, and overflow onto you, and allow you to overflow onto them. Those are the people you need to surround yourself with this year. And if you don't have any, allow yourself to find them in a way that is natural. So it might take some time, but that's fine. You want people who are vetted, who are going to actually be able to do this, not people who are going to betray you 3 months later after you met them. So it's okay to take it slow and just start with yourself this year. So now, going back to the Ace of Swords, pardon me for hopping around for a little bit, but it really does feel a lot like, wah, like a purpose is handed to you. Like suddenly and you have to be on the other side of this transformation in order for this to manifest properly. I just need to tell you that. You have to surrender everything. You have to go through the transformation. On the other end, you have the sword and the stone. And the Lady of the Lake is Santa Muerte, or Our Lady of Guadalupe. Maybe both. I guess it'd be both. And they're allowing you this opportunity to step into your full potential, or at least to start to. You get to grasp onto that. You get to see a new perspective on things. It really does feel like Excalibur. You grab onto it and suddenly you have this new purpose. This is a very, very probable thing this year. And a lot of times I see the Ace of Swords as something that is a little bit scary. I don't really do swords so much personally. I'm not a swords person. I was once in the military. I was there for a scholarship. I wasn't there for fighting. And I actually became a conscientious objector. So I'm not a fighter at all, even in that period of my life. And swords have always just felt very much like that drill sergeant mentality of, we're going to cut you down to build you back up. So normally I'm not fond of swords. Normally I'm like, ugh, this card again. But in this perspective, it doesn't feel like that. It feels more like the divine right of kings type of thing, but in your own life. Specifically like, oh, look, you pulled the sword from the stone and you get to reign in peace, because everyone sees the power inherent in that gift. That's what it feels like. It's not a sword specifically in this reading. Some readings are different. Specifically in this reading, it's a sword that's there to give you a type of power, but not a power that's used. It's a power that's used only for love, only for nurturance, only for sustenance, only to bring more. It's a card of awakening. 100% it's a card of awakening. And it's showing that awakening to be able to, the only way that this is a negative card, a negative sword when used against others, is that it would be a sword of awakening. And awakening sucks. You have to go through, the darkness, as you're probably going through right now. So in that case, it's also actually a blessing. Because a lot of people are going through this darkness, and having the sword of awakening can be very helpful. It as with all swords, it can be a double-edged sword. You can cause harm by forcing someone into an awakening. So beware about being forceful with this energy. It's not something to be used with force. It's something more of a practice sword, more of a beautiful sword that goes up on the wall. And when someone touches it, they're awakened. It's more that type of energy. It's an energy based on conscious choice. It's an energy based on having consent. It's that type of energy. It's a defensive energy, perhaps, but it's not. If you look at the card, the sword isn't being used. It's more of a glistening object, like a sacred object, like a relic. It's used in that way. So keep that in mind. So moving, that's a supportive card. So I guess it didn't matter that I went back to the Two of Cups, because it's honestly just defining that a little bit more. It's showing us where we were accepting love that wasn't actually love, that was actually trauma, that was actually pain. We were believing ourselves to love another person, and maybe we truly do love them. That's, again, on that universal level. That's that I'm stepping back and loving you from afar because you're hurting me level. But what we maybe was trauma bonded. So keep that in mind. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Yeah, I mean, love is not hurt, Love does not hurt. Not intentionally. And when it's brought to the attention that love does hurt, that person, if they love you, would absolutely consciously change what they do, because it is conscious. Love is conscious as well. And a lot of people right now are not conscious. They're refusing to be conscious. When you are with the Sword of Awakening, you have no choice but to be conscious. So beware of people who are not conscious. They might love you. They might say that they love you. They might actually love you. But they might also hurt you because they don't really know what love is. How can you truly love someone if you don't love and respect and honor yourself? How can you truly love someone? You can only do so at the level that you're at, is the answer. How can you love someone if you're not conscious? If you're not conscious, you don't really know them. You don't really know who they are. You don't understand their needs, and you don't connect to the garden of their desires. So you're not able to contribute. You're not able to water that with them. And that's something to keep in mind. You can still love those people, but I encourage you to do so at a distance, at that compassionate level, at the level where we can, you don't need to, you are not responsible for watering them. I guess that's where I should leave it. So moving into our hurdle, and this was supposed to be a supporting card, but as it was being pulled, it flipped sideways, and I was told that's what it should be. So usually I pull two supportive cards. So this is a supportive card, but it's a hurdle. It's something for us to navigate, something for us to release, move forward, move through, to sit with in some cases, to contemplate. It might be a burden or a hurdle, but it's something that once you navigate it, you're going to be able to, I guess, access its power, access its mysteries, and those mysteries are going to set you free. So it's the Two of Swords, again with the frickin' swords. I really am not a fan of swords, but in this case, it's a very liberating card. It's scissors. I love this card here. So Two of Swords in most decks, and in the deck that I usually work with my personal clients anyway, which is a little less with the Santa Muerte transformative energy, and the deck I normally work with goes a lot into psychological things, and I usually approach it from more of a coaching perspective. Clearly what I'm doing here is a little more Santa Muerte biased and a little less coaching. But usually it's talking, and so this card's going to be both, by the way. It's talking about a place where you feel completely in the dark, completely alone, like we were just describing, where, you have you can only see two paths. It's like a fork in the road in the darkness. I really feel Hecate vibes with it a lot. And Hecate and Santa Muerte are very similar in energies. A lot of people who have worked with them, I mean, might connect to what I say here. A lot of times I have a statue of Hecate, an altar to her. She's very separate. They don't necessarily work great together. They work fine separate. But Santa Muerte will remind you that she does what Hecate does, but she does more since she is a magical system in and of herself. But I still love and respect Hecate because, I've been trained as a Wiccan priestess and she's kind of the grandmother. And she's done some good stuff with me. And so I do like connecting to her. This is very much that sort of Hecate, specific Hecate vibes, the keys of the crossroads, So it's a lot like that. It's a lot like being at a crossroads. There's two paths, and it's almost like a test, but nothing feels good. This path looks like there's a wolf that's going to devour you. That path, it looks like there's a cliff you're going to fall off of probably. It's really dark, and, there's a warning sign. And where you're at also is really terrible, and you can't see anything aside from that stake right in front of you that denotes the two crossroads. Let's say Hecate or Santa Muerte or whatever, hovering over you, watching for your decision. That's almost cold and callous. They are much more hands-on than that usually, but sometimes it can feel that way. And usually the card will have a moon or some sort of lunar reference to it. And it denotes just, in that moment, you have to surrender to the darkness. You have to surrender to where you're at. And you have to just allow yourself a little bit of time, because it's a card of being triggered usually. Allow yourself a little bit of time for everything to calm down. Things will start to open up for you in about a month or so. A lunar cycle is what I usually say. A lunar cycle, maybe at most 2. And so that's what that card's usually denoting. And then things will be a little bit lighter. You'll be able to see a little bit more clearly. There might be another path that you didn't see. In this case specifically, we have looks like Sempashwil, and I probably said that wrong, the little Mexican marigolds, and you have a pair of scissors. And really what this is talking about is all of that cord cutting that I was talking about before. Right now is a great time, up until spring even. After spring is fine too, but right now it's such a good time for cord cutting. It's better than many of the seasons that I've been through previously, many of the dark seasons previously. It's perfect for cord cutting. And just keep in mind, if you need to access that energy and you're listening to this video later on in the year, there are other good times to access this dark energy as well. Of course, around Samhain, usually we're surrendering and dying and things are coming up out of the graveyard at that time for us to deal with, for us to be triggered with, for us to see and identify. So it may not be the best time, but you can do cord cutting then, especially if it's things that you've noticed throughout the year. Harvest time, also Mabon, a great time. So that would be like, September-ish, late September, I believe, for Mabon. Why am I not remembering this? Lammas is at the beginning of Leo season. Lammas is Leo season. So yeah, I got that about right. It would be when we're moving into like Virgo to Libra season. So about right, yeah. About end of September, middle of September, something like this. That's a great time because it's harvest. You can harvest all the things that are working for you and sacrifice some of the things that aren't. Which is a lot of blessings and then sacrificing. You can definitely do this at the summer solstice, because summer solstice is all of that bright energy, but it also has the flip side. Just like in winter solstice, I love doing my cord cutting on winter solstice. It is amazing, especially if you do cord cutting with candles. Whew, it's great. But that winter solstice is literally a celebration of the sun. It's a celebration of the darkness and the darkest night of the year, but we celebrate it with light. Same thing if you're talking about the summer solstice. It's a celebration of the light, but we honor the darkness and where we came from. So that's a great time to do cord cutting too. But any time in this dark season before we reemerge in the spring, which is around Easter time to Beltane again, is great to do cord cutting. Really good to do cord cutting. You can do things where you braid things together and cut them. You can, burn things. You can use literal scissors. You can do scythe magic. You can do all sorts of things with this. You can sacrifice literal flowers if you want to by cutting them and allowing them to compost into the ground, or just cutting them and placing them on Santa Muerte's altar and having each one be a specific thing that you're sacrificing. You can, and then when they start to rot, turn bad, you can literally compost them or throw them under a tree or whatever. And that's very symbolic. You can do bay leaf burning where you write the thing on the bay leaf and you burn it. Like there's so many things you can do. It doesn't matter what you do. Do cord cutting. Do cord cutting where you release your ties to things. Trim away. Think of yourself as a sheep with all of this excess. Or my long-haired cat Loki is right here laying down, sleeping next to me while I'm doing this. And on rare occasion, he'll go through a season where he gets really bad mats. It's happened 2 times in his long life. And I'll have to shave him. You're like a sheep or a cat who has these mats all over you, all of these wounds, all of these things. You don't need it anymore. Allow Santa Muerte to come with her shears, with her scythe, and shear you and get rid of that. It can be used to make blankets. It can be used for knitting and all sorts of wonderful things. It doesn't do any good to have that on you. It only causes you pain. I'm hoping you can see after all of these different ways of saying it exactly what you need to be doing this time of the year. If it harms you, cut it out of your life. You don't even have to let anything know you cut things out of your life. You don't have to make a big deal of it. You can make boundaries in place so that, if someone disrespects a boundary, you just walk away and then you come back to them later. That is okay too, but you need to create space and distance between the things that you cannot control and who are not awakened and who are not having your best interests at hand, including social media, including people in your family, including loved ones, including friends, including whatever. You don't have to completely cut things out of your life, but you might want to. It depends on you. So take that into consideration. And now I'm going to move into, although this is so incredibly long, I knew it would be long. This is very long. I'm moving into the Santa Muerte Oracle, which is by the same author who did the Santa Muerte Tarot deck, and I'm only pulling one of those. I already pulled it. And it's fascinating because I actually, during the dark time of the year, when we moved down in around Samhain, Day of the Dead, when we moved down into the underworld, I pulled this exact card for the people of my Patreon. So it just shows me that this is continuing. I bet if I would have pulled it last year about the dark time of the year, it might have also been the card, or the card that would have been keeping people in the underworld perhaps. And it's Mictlan Ticutli, and he is the lord of the underworld. If we go back to Aztec or Mexica mythology, he is the lord of the underworld. He is Aztec Nahual. I mean, there were all sorts of different tribes, and I'm using the word Aztec because some people may not know what I'm referring to otherwise. But he was the god of the underworld, god of death, lord of the underworld, and he reigned with his queen of Mictlan, who is now Santa Muerte, but back then was Mictlan Siwal or Mictecasiwal. I've heard very well-trained Mexican devotees argue to the death about both ways of pronouncing her name, so I call her both. But anyway, Mictlan Ticutli. And this is what it says. It says, king of the dead and the afterlife, ruler of the deepest part of the underworld, along with his wife, Mictecasual is what it says in here. He forms the binary and complementary opposition of disaggregation of bodies and matter. So we could call it, if we're talking alchemically speaking, I'm not talking gender, I'm talking alchemical. We could call it the masculine energy of this breakdown, of this transformational process, which I only was describing through Santa Muerte because she has taken all of it over. If he still is a part of her, then he is so in the shadows supporting her because he's not a part of the modern cult of Santa Muerte. I just want to make that clear. That doesn't mean he doesn't exist. That doesn't mean his energy is gone. I'm not entirely sure what happened to it. But anyway, so he forms the binary. He's the masculine, quote, quote, complementary opposition of disaggregation of bodies and matter, the breakdown that occurs where things go back to the building blocks of all of consciousness, all of energetic vibration, all of matter. We see him devouring a body for rupture and fading out at the starting point for any successive work of creation or regeneration, which Santa Muerte did so on a more celestial level when she was Mictlan Siwal or Mictecasual. You would see images of her devouring the stars in the sky in just one big gulp. So they both would she maybe is more cosmic of this energy. You could see him as maybe more under the earth of this energy. I guess that's one way to put it, the masculine, feminine, alchemical energies of it. But we're talking here about the breakdown of energy, let's say, and matter and bodies and whatever, because it's not just bodies, it's not just physical things, it's also our energy. It's also our vibration, our consciousness, all of it. We see him devouring a body for rupture, fading out of the starting point for any successive work of creation or regeneration, which is being able to make that go down to nothing. He devours it for rupture. Santa Muerte is the one that devours everything and continues the process. So he's the alchemic solve, or the separator, to separate, not to solve something, but to dissolve, let's say. The analysis before the synthesis, the phoenix that dies and turns to ashes before the rebirth. And so the advice of the dead here is it's time to look at the situation from a more in-depth point of view, to analyze the circumstances before you begin putting the pieces back together. There was a typo there. So yeah, he is that ability to recognize the things that we are releasing, so we don't have to allow. They might try, because our brains are wired for repetition. Our brains are wired to go back to that which is familiar to us. So it's very possible that once we release or cord cut or whatever, that we are inclined to fixate again. Even though we pulled the weed, we are inclined to replant the same weed if we're not careful. And so he allows us with the vision to see this, to look in depth at this, to realize and analyze different circumstances during the breakdown, I suppose, during the release, during the surrender. So we don't have to go back to that anymore. It is a type of masculine, again, alchemical masculine type resolve. I don't even want to use positive or negative. It's hard not using gendered speech when we're talking about alchemical things. So I don't mean that gendered. I mean that on an alchemical level, but and then we can put the pieces back together. And because of this, I will read Mictecasual, which would be the primal version of Santa Muerte from like 500 years ago. Just because she's the feminine aspect of this, so you can see the difference. The card we pulled was Mictecasual, and it is a card of very. It's being held in the darkness. It almost feels like held for ransom. Think Hades type energy, right? You're being held for ransom kind of in the underworld. Although it's not supposed to be something negative, it's supposed to be something transformational. You're only being held there because you won't release. So Mictecasual is the queen of the dead in the afterlife, responsible for memory as a whole and individual memories. She represents a principle of synthesis and aggregation of bodies and matter, complementary to that of her husband Mictlan Tikutli. She's the alchemic coagula to join together, a continuation on a lower level of the concept of synthesis expressed by the feminine card. In fact, we see her near some recently remolded bodies devouring stars during the day, because just as life cannot exist without death, day cannot exist without night. She is not the energy of rebirth. Again, she doesn't have that power. She has the power to put all the pieces that are necessary in that alchemical circle in the womb, let's say, and hand it over then to her sister, who is the force of life, who can then breathe the spark of life into the body. Santa Muerte maybe could make the body happen. She's the keeper of the bones, traditionally speaking, in Mexica lore. She's the one who would take those bones and put them together. The body's ready to go, but it's still an empty vessel. She can't create the life. She can't breathe the life in. She takes the life and recycles it, and then allows the life to be breathed back in. She's not the one who does it, though. Without her, it cannot happen. Period. So yeah, she's the feminine alchemical continuation on the lower level of the concept of synthesis. So in fact, we see her, as I was saying, life cannot exist without death, day cannot exist without night. So the advice of the dead for her, if it were her card, it's not. The study and analysis you have done is sufficient, and the time has come to put them to work, enacting your own synthesis. So the masculine card of this, the Mictlantecuhtli, could almost be seen as I don't want to use the word violent, but it can be, because it's literally that breaking apart of things. It's taking something and destroying it at its most extreme. I'm trying to make this extreme to show you the masculine, feminine alchemical energies of this. It's being able to take that and just boom, breaking it apart into millions of pieces. That is a masculine force. We put that upon Santa Muerte. But who knows who actually does it? Maybe he's still in the background. I don't know. Maybe he's not. Maybe this is all her jurisdiction now. I don't know. But then the feminine energies of that would be being able to continue that. So what this is saying is a lot of people still need to go through that process of breakdown, still need to go through that process of shattering, in a sense. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a shattering of the belief systems that are holding you back, shattering of the chains that are keeping you shackled in the darkness. You're not supposed to be shackled. You're supposed to be surrounded in the womb, surrounded with love, surrounded with protection, surrounded with, and you are. Santa Muerte has you in her cloak, but in your mind, those shackles are still there. You cannot move through this process if you're shackled. You have to be able to move into the womb be transferred into the womb of the mother. You cannot unless you get rid of those shackles, unless you break. There's that word, shatter, destroy, the masculine concepts here. Destroy those things and allow the pieces to fall at Santa Muerte's feet. For some people, it might resemble a breakdown of sorts. And so if it does, make sure you get yourself the support that you need. Make sure that if you haven't gone through a breakdown yet, I still recommend that you make sure that you have support in place for if you do, because you might be surprised. It might happen. It is not uncommon with this type of energy that we're going through right now. It might be another year of darkness for a lot of people, but it's not supposed to be punitive. It's not supposed to be suffering. It's not supposed to be something that's awful. No. It's supposed to be something that is liberating, is freeing, is something that takes weight and burdens off of your shoulders, something that frees you. But you can only have that happen if you are able to surrender to the powers that will break that for you. If you're able to surrender to Santa Muerte, if you're able to surrender all of your preconceptions, all of your thoughts about these things, you have to surrender them. This was a very long reading. I feel like I might still have a few things to say, and if I do, I will add them on. But yeah, that's essentially the process. And a lot of people this year are still stuck in that. That's the same card that we had 3 months ago. Yeah, right around 3 months ago. It's the same card that I pulled. So we are still in the same cycle. A lot of people have not released the cycle. A lot of people have not stepped through the transformation. A lot of people have not released. Allow yourself the space, the time to do so. Allow yourself, give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to do this. Give yourself permission to break down, to feed your tears to Santa Muerte. Do that. Feed your tears to her. Let those be an offering. Feed your words to her. Your words of lamentation. Your words of Grief. A lot of people might need to go through a grieving process. There's a lot of things that we have lost, and there will be a lot of things that we will lose. We cannot continue in the same paradigm that we have been living in. And in order to step into a new one, we have to lose things. We have to surrender things. We have to allow things to be lost. And some of those things have been things that people have been really cared a lot about. I know with COVID, there's been a lot of people suffering and a lot of people who've died. And that's also something to acknowledge. Grieving must happen. The grieving process must happen, whether it's for releasing something that you've identified with that hurts so bad. There's going to be a grieving process with that. Allow yourself to grieve. Allow yourself to grieve for weird things even that you don't even understand. It's okay. You're allowed to grieve. Allow yourself to grieve for things that you really wanted, but you're never going to have again. I used to be a professional musician. I was assaulted and went through a good year of really hardcore abuse. And that's what I have my PTSD from. PTSD, and I've had that for 22 years now, for a long time. And I bring that up because that's something I've had to grieve for. That's something I've had to release. I've had to come to terms with the fact that I will never be a professional musician again because it made me not able to play music. I wasn't able to physically. I was not able to play music for years. And now I can, but I'm not that caliber anymore. And we'll see. Maybe that dream will come back around for me like a butterfly. Like they say, you release it and it might come back to you. And it might. It also might not. And so you must grieve for the possibility to never come back again. That's hard. But once you're able to let that go, once you're able to cry your tears for it, you will feel better on the other side. You might have to do it several times. If it's a person that you're grieving for, you might grieve for the rest of your life. But the first time you go through the full entirety of the grieving process, where you actually are able to release, that is the most healing. And then you just replicate that on smaller levels. And it doesn't have to carry the same heaviness, the same weight to it. It's almost like a dark cloud or miasma. And once you are able to grieve the first time, you're able to lift that cloud or miasma instead of seeing things like memories or with pain, which is a kind of, it's not PTSD, but it's similar. I'm saying this because people with PTSD or, maybe even panic attacks will have flashbacks. And this is similar, actually, except the flashbacks are painful memories because of the pain that was inflicted. And a memory from a loved one who's passed, for example, those were not painful memories, but they are now because of what has happened. So they're slightly different, but in the same way, you can release them by grieving. In the same way, just by going through the grieving process, allowing yourself to expel all of the buried emotions that are attached to it. Again, it's attachment. Allowing yourself to detach from any part of the pain of that, any part of the holding on with the pain, detaching from identification with it, personal identification with it. That then allows you to step into a place of healing. That then allows, on a PTSD level, it allows those flashbacks oftentimes start going away, actually. They'll happen sometimes. I still get some. Usually mine happen in dreams. Excuse me. But they don't carry as much weight. And I know myself when I wake up. I know who I am. And I know that that's not me. I know that that was me. So it's past. And I do some grieving and I can let it go. And so it gets much easier because of that. Same thing with people who go through death and the memories are almost like specters of what they once were, or they're like haunting, they're like coming out of the graveyard, they're cloaked in a miasma that's just grief ridden. If you allow yourself to really release the buried emotions that are connected to that, and allow yourself not to identify anymore with the negativity associated with that, not to identify with, and that's, I'm trying to phrase this in the right way. You're going to be able then to, how would I say that? To release the guilt, to release any guilt, shame, blame, any place where, these things, and that includes survivors with flashbacks, that includes people who are having memories that give them pain, even if they're happy memories. It's that part of the grief. Surrendering those things, those shadow elements of fear, shame, blame, yada, 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 all those negative type of shadow emotions. If you can really just identify them and release them, grieve with them, that's the grieving process. That's literally what it is. Surrender those to Santa Muerte's feet and allow her to take them away. You don't have to identify with those shadow elements. You just have to release them. That's it. I know that sounds simple. It is hard. I understand this. I'm trying to simplify things so it's easier for you to see. So yeah, doing that is going to shift. Doing that means that then the weight is taken off. The miasma is lifted. You're able to remember the person in a more positive light. You're able to talk about things that have happened to you without your entire body screaming out of control and taking you into a panic attack or whatever. It is possible. Not only is it possible, it's probable, and it does happen. I've done both. So I can assure you, if you go through the process, if you surrender and trust, you will come out the other side. You might need to have a little bit of support, and just make sure that support system are people who understand what you're going through, people who are willing to be supportive of this, and people who won't judge you, people who don't trigger you. So have a system, have a group of people that are like that, and just explain some of the things that you're releasing this year are pretty heavy and you might need someone to turn to. And are they a safe person for you? And you'll already know if you feel that they're a safe person for you, but then they can give you consent for being a safe person. Have a couple therapist numbers on hand, people who have referred you to, maybe this one's really good, this one, keep a couple, because they might not work out. That's just the nature of things. May not work out for you, might not work out for them, might not work out for many reasons. So just keep a few on hand, and know where you can turn if you need to. So that being said, I believe in all of you. I believe that this can be a very powerful year for you, a year of transformation, a year of taking grieving, of taking all the heaviness and transmuting it into light. I mean that literally and metaphysically, metaphorically, and being able to really start to dream again. It's a great year for writing. It's a great year for writing down your dreams. It's a great year for writing things and burning it if you need to release it. That's another really good thing. So all of these things, and I don't want to take up too much more time. I think I covered most things for the year. I'll be going deeper into things on the Patreon for things that I maybe glossed over and could go deeper with, tips, techniques, all of these types of things. And I hope everyone makes a wonderful year for themselves. There's always enough time to make time for yourself. There's always enough time to go back and do things the right way. So if you're listening to this and it's even years from when I recorded it, take everything to heart. It's not too late. You still have time. You always have time until you stop breathing. And even then, you still have time. Blessings to you all, and may the bony one bless you and guide you.